How is US President Joe Biden's document scandal different from former President Donald Trump's? After a second batch of classified documents were discovered, it's a growing political crisis for Mr. Biden. Similar in that they both appear to have mishandled classified information. There are some key differences, though, in how they were discovered, but also in the response as well. Here's how one House Democrat is characterizing it.
My sense is the administration has done everything right upon finding that these documents were in the wrong place. Obviously, it would have been better had it not happened in the first place, but they've certainly dealt with it the right way.
But the GOP is wasting no time calling it a double standard.
Well, what's so surprising to me is that this came out before the election. Why does his Department of Justice treat people differently? Every time we find something that comes out before the election dealing with Biden's family, it's pushed under the rug. It's called a lie. It's called the Russians are doing it. And now why did they treat President Trump totally different as DOJ? Why did they raid?
Does he have a point? Is there a double standard? There's one person to ask, senior political analyst John Avlon. I mean, it does smack of double standards, but there are some key differences here as well, the Democrats are pointing out.
There's some essential differences, and it's important to, first of all, say that the same standard should be applied to people and presidents from both parties. That's basic. That's table stakes. But the key differences are worth focusing on because they are material. They're fundamental to understanding the context here. So in the case of Donald Trump, you've got more than 325 documents, right? Over 60 top secret that he's being investigated for obstruction of justice because the Department of Justice ultimately went to Mar-a-Lago because there had been a resistance to handing over all the documents. In the case of President Biden, while it is absolutely inappropriate to have top secret documents in your private possession, when these were found by his lawyers cleaning out an old office, they immediately contacted the NARA, which is the National Records Association, who then contacted the Justice Department. Now, it is troubling for the White House, for Americans, that a second tranche of documents has been found, and the White House needs to be radically transparent, and more so than they have been, about what's occurred. But to ignore the differences is to ignore the real issues.
The other issue is you talk about the White House transparency. People say it's not there because they're not commenting on it.
I don't think that's sufficient. I mean, you know, it is absolutely appropriate for a White House press secretary to say we cannot comment about something being reviewed by the Justice Department. But there is an appearance of stonewalling, an appearance of defensiveness, and consistent with GART basic procedures, they need to be more open. And it may be that they do not know how many documents are out there. But gestures like, for example, Attorney General Merrick Garland referring the procedural review to a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in Chicago, that's good. That should calm people's concerns about a partisan, self-dealing nature. It may ultimately lead to a special counsel to review these things, to create parity. But the impulse to be defensive about this is what leads to a disaster, as Richard Nixon famously found out, and there's nothing like Watergate in this case, but sometimes it's not the crime, it's the cover-up, and anything resembling that needs to be jettisoned. Radical transparency needs to be the order of the day for the White House.
What do you expect from Donald Trump? Do you expect him to use this to capitalize on it, or might he just let it sit there and do the work for him? Because it does speak to a lot of his narrative, doesn't it?
You know, the idea that Donald Trump would let anything sit there and do the work for him, I think, would be the triumph of hope over experience. Republicans are going to pounce all over that. You heard Speaker McCarthy do the same, and to embrace a degree of whataboutism. But again, that can't fly if it's fundamentally at odds with the facts. Now, on the surface, for folks who are doing a drive-by the cycle, there are parallels, obviously. A president who made a big deal about protecting top-secret documents is found to have had his own top-secret documents. That's a fundamental problem. That smacks of hypocrisy. But engaging in whataboutism to blur all the fundamental differences with regard to obstruction, the number of documents, the scale of the documents, that's just ignoring reality. And that's you know, if you buy into that spin, then the tail starts wagging the dog real quick.